Today, we're going to tackle a really difficult and painful topic, parental alienation. We're going to look at it from two sides of the same coin. First, the heartbreaking psychological damage it does to a child, and second, how the legal system in California is equipped to fight back.
So let's get one thing straight right from the start. This is not just parents having a bad divorce. Parental alienation is a specific, severe form of psychological manipulation. The scientific community is clear. It's a form of family violence, and it is absolutely emotional child abuse.
All right, here's our roadmap. We're going to break this down into 4 key parts. First, we'll define this invisible abuse. Then, we'll look at the anatomy of the harm it causes. After that, we'll cover California's legal response. And finally, we'll talk about what intervention and recovery actually look like.
Okay, let's get into it. First up, we really need to understand what this abuse looks like. And, just as importantly, we need to draw a bright, clear line between this and a situation where a child's feelings of rejection are actually justified.
And this is the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's the central challenge for courts and for therapists. Look, if a child pulls away from a parent who has been genuinely abusive or neglectful, that's a healthy, self-protective instinct. We call that justified estrangement. Alienation, well, that's a whole different beast, and telling them apart is everything.
This is how we move from somebody's opinion to actual evidence. In an alienation case, the child's reasons for hating a parent are often just flimsy. They're vague, or you can hear that they're literally borrowed phrases from the other parent. But with justified estrangement, a child can give you specific, fact-based examples. The biggest giveaway, though, is the child's attitude. Alienation creates this black and white, all good versus all evil parent dynamic. There's no gray area.
You have to understand, these aren't just random acts of anger. This is a systematic campaign. It's a playbook. Researchers have identified at least 17 different strategies, from constantly trashing the other parent to physically blocking phone calls and visits. The end goal is to completely destroy the child's bond with the targeted parent, using methods that are, frankly, analogous to brainwashing.
So that's what the abuse is. But what does it do? This is where it gets incredibly serious, because the lifelong consequences, they all land on the shoulders of the child. The child is always the primary victim here.
Clinicians who work with these kids see a consistent cluster of these 8 symptoms. One of the most heartbreaking is what they call the independent thinker phenomenon. This is where a child will swear up and down that the decision to hate the other parent is all theirs. But in reality, it's a tragic psychological defense. They have to adopt the alienator's narrative just to survive an impossible loyalty conflict.
And this right here, this gets to the absolute core of the damage. When you force a child to reject a parent, you are forcing them to reject half of who they are. This isn't just about custody schedules. It is a profound, violent attack on a child's sense of self, and it can lead to a lifetime of self-hatred.
And how deep does that wound go? Just look at this number. Long-term studies found that of adults who went through this as children, a staggering 30% reported having suicidal thoughts. Let that sink in. This isn't a private family matter. This is a public health crisis.
This kind of abuse casts a very long shadow. Adults who are alienated as children have significantly higher rates of clinical depression, anxiety, and substance abuse. Because the most fundamental relationship in their life taught them that love can be taken away, they develop deep-seated trust issues, which tragically leads to them having a higher rate of divorce in their own lives. The cycle continues.
So this brings us to the courthouse. How does the legal system, and specifically the system here in California, step in when this kind of psychological destruction is happening to a child?
Well, here's something you might not know. California doesn't actually have a law on the books with the words parental alienation in it. Instead, the courts tackle the behaviors through one single guiding principle: what is in the best interest of the child. And the law explicitly states that it's in the child's best interest to have frequent and continuing contact with both parents. So, by definition, any action that tries to destroy that contact is against the child's best interest.
Now, one of the most vicious tactics used in these cases is the weaponization of false allegations. It's a scorched earth strategy, but California law has a very powerful shield against it. Family Code Section 3027.1 gives a judge the authority to make the person who knowingly lied pay for every single penny the other parent had to spend on lawyers to defend themselves. It gives the law real teeth.
So here's a quick snapshot of the legal toolkit. You've got Section 3020, which is the best interest standard. That's the foundation. Then you have 3027.1 and 3027.5, which brings serious consequences for false allegations. And then there's Section 7501, which deals with move-away cases, because courts are very aware that moving a child far away can be a tactic of alienation. Okay, so let's say the court has identified the harm and it's ready to intervene. What happens next? How do you begin to heal this kind of deep relational wound? It is not easy, and it requires a very specific, very specialized approach.
The primary tool is something called reunification therapy, and it's not your typical counseling session. This is a court-ordered process where a judge creates what's called a legal container. That might mean temporarily limiting or suspending contact with the alienating parent to give the therapist a safe, protected space to actually start the delicate work of repairing the bond.
For the parent who has been targeted, trying to co-parent is often an exercise in futility. It's impossible. So the essential strategic move is to shift to something called parallel parenting. You stop trying to collaborate. Instead, it becomes disengaged, professional, almost businesslike. Communication is kept to an absolute minimum, focused only on logistics. It's about protecting yourself and the child from constant conflict. And when you're parallel parenting, the BIF method is your best friend. The whole point of your communication has to change. You are no longer trying to solve problems with the other person. You are simply creating a clear, calm, factual record for the court to see. Keep it brief, informative, friendly, and firm. It takes all the emotional fuel out of the fire and shows the judge you're the responsible one.
And so, after all the legal jargon and the clinical terms, this is what it all boils down to. The fundamental injury of parental alienation is a catastrophic breach of trust. The child is taught that a parent's love, the very foundation of their world, can be used as a weapon. And that wound, that single devastating wound, can tragically shape their ability to form healthy, trusting relationships for the rest of their lives.